We are getting towards the sharp end of the 2022 winter warmer for caterhamracer.com, and we head to our fourth and final qualifier tonight before we get to the last chance saloon and then the final. It is the Snetterton 300 circuit in virtual Norfolk that hosts, and of course a final next three spots to be decided before we have our last chance race at I think it's Croft, before we then go to our decider in a few weeks' time. So Snetterton is the venue, and there's another three spots up for grabs, and it should be fantastic on a circuit that, quite frankly, was almost built for caterham racing. So it should be slipstream action and plenty of overtaking all the way from start to finish. Scott Woodwiss back in the commentary box after a week away, once again with Chris Hutchinson. And Chris, of course, from the heady heights of Scotland all the way to the East Anglia and the eastern part of the UK with Snetterton, two very different circuits, particularly in length, particularly in nature. But this one certainly should provide plenty of typical caterham racing that we know and love, that we've seen plenty in real life at this circuit. And I think in the virtual world it should be no different.
Yeah, good evening everybody, and welcome to Norfolk, as you say. You can't really get two diametrically opposed tracks, can you? This one is sort of dead flat, really long, and long straights, and there's none of that in Knockhill. It does definitely offer a new challenge, as we see David Rowe there proving how tricky the rear end of these cars are, spinning away. The drivers have just started qualification. In the sim world, we can travel around the country as much as we like. We don't have to deal with the A11 and all sorts of things to get down to Norfolk. So, definitely interested to see how people get on tonight.
And of course, as a reminder though, me being absent last week, but Chris was very capable, of course, to look after the broadcast entirely in his own shoes. And so in that broadcast at Knockhill, we saw Chris Skillicorn, Blair McConaughey and John Lang pick up the three qualifying spots. Blair McConaughey, I'm sure, certainly pleased to get an automatic qualifying spot at his home circuit. And they, of course, join Jaroslav Cherny, Jensen Hassler and Andrew Parker that qualified at Cadwell Park all the way back a few weeks ago at the Silverstone International Circuit. It was Will Rossetti, Ryan Hooker and Christian Zaruta. Those are the first 9 drivers that are guaranteed places in the Grand Final, which takes place at either Alton Park on the International Circuit or the Anglesey Coastal Circuit, depending on which circuit wins the driver vote, because we're putting it into the hands of the drivers. Whether that's a smart thing or not, we'll find out. But Alton Park or Anglesey will be the host. The drivers will vote which circuit they want to go to, and that will be the venue. Because before then, as I said, we've got our last chance saloon race, which is for the final 6 qualifying spots to make up a grid of 18 qualifiers for the final, and that will take place at Croft next week on February 22nd, so be sure to tune in for that. But of course, we look at the calibre of the drivers that have come through already, Chris, and of course there are some big names that have made it already that we expect to do so. Zaruta, Cherny, Blair McConaughey and others in there too. There are still names which, even the ones that raced as soon as last week, that still haven't booked their place in there, that you would typically expect to have done so by now. And I know we talk about it all the time, but it just shows once again not only the competitive nature and the increasing competitiveness of this particular collective of drivers in caterhamracer.com, but it also shows essentially that it can only, as David Rowe found out, for example, it only takes one small mistake and it can go from an automatic qualifying spot to spinning out of control and forcing you to have to come back next week.
Yeah, it's we're getting down, like you say, to the tail end of this season, and the opportunities to qualify are actually reducing by the all the time. We've got 3 tonight, and then 6 final ones next week. You'll notice in the sort of the driver's pane on the left-hand side of our screen now that we've got some funny names, and that's actually because I tried to be useful and helpful and put who'd already qualified. So anytime you see a bracket dot on the screen, actually that means that person has already qualified. So we see that Chris Skillicorn at the top there, Andrew Parker and John Lang, they're all qualifiers already, and therefore they're invisible to those qualification spots. We've got 3 on offer. You can see Alan Curtis right up here following him round now. Superb result in 4th. He's a sort of Snetterton specialist. He really loves it around here.
Wasn't blowing Oggies though, he was very sideways having to stand on the anchors to get that ready. One reminder for those who've been watching caterhamracer.com before and wondering what this car is, well, it's not the Academy car and it's not the 420R. This is the newly put together Caterham 310R, which is the ultimate evolution of what starts out as the original Academy car in real life. So this has been extensively developed, of course, behind the scenes to make it go. And the one characteristic I think that you've mentioned that a lot of drivers have said is that this car, compared to the other two, is a lot more tail happy, a lot more twitchy. So these drivers really having to push the limits of this car, but they tend to find those limits a lot quicker than we did in the other two cars, whether it's because the Academy car has a little less power, and of course therefore they're driving at a slightly slower pace, or the fact that the 420R has of course the full slicks, it has better suspension, it can really hold on the circuit, whereas this car, bit more edgy, bit more difficult to control. Even though it is the ultimate evolution, it's not the ultimate grip levels of an academy car, and it certainly shows some of the drivers finding those limits, and as you saw with Alan Curtis and co, at times pushing them a little bit too much.
Yeah, it definitely is looser at the rear, so the model, we just sort of tweaked its parameters. It's always good to have different challenge. We want to give everyone a flavour of all the different ways you can set up a Caterham to drive and operate. And we've seen people like Cherney and Will Rossetti absolutely flying in this iteration of the car. They love the rear of their cars to be dancing around. You'll see drivers backing into corners and all sorts, more sort of MotoGP style almost, throwing and flinging them around, and it's really good to see. It offers a different thing, and what David Rowe pointed out to me was that in qualifying and when you're flat out, the car is actually almost more stable. It's when you get into that race scenario where you are having to sort of temper yourself and give and take a little bit that actually that it gets more tricky to drive at that point because the rear end isn't fully lit up.
That certainly means, particularly with some of these long corners, means that drivers have to be very careful in their throttle application when they're going through, and also the way they treat the corners. See a couple of cars, including Tom McEwen. There was one car that was locked up big time. I think that's possibly, I'm trying to work out, maybe Andy Parker that did that. But either way, it's interesting to see how these cars behave compared to the other two, and particularly on the circuit here, where you've got lots of long corners, lots of tricky braking zones as well, where the cars can get quite tail happy and quite sideways and quite loose, especially when you're trying to slow down into the corners, when you've got essentially your trail braking into an ever decreasing radius when it's a long corner to get in here. Particularly here at the Brundle and Nelson, you're braking essentially all the way through the curve in some cases, and then you have to flick right through Nelson and try and get the power on. So trying to keep the rear end steady on this car is a challenge in itself, not just trying to slow the car down, but to get the power on through some of the tighter corners. So I think if there was ever a challenging circuit to try and master this car, I think Snetterton certainly is the place to do it. Yeah,
Snetterton's an awesome track, especially in sort of, I always used to love going to Snetterton for testing because it's got a bit of everything. You've got your long corners like Corham and, like you say, Brundle and Nelson that really keep the car sort of on edge. And then you've got other tight technicals, and you've got hairpins and tight hairpins and open corners. So it's got a bit of everything, and yeah, it's a real test of all the kind of different mechanics that come along with the car.
Those who are starting to master it at the moment, particularly at least the man at the top of the times now, is David Rowe. He's put in a 2 minute 7.658. We see Tom McEwen exploring the limits there of Richie's corner. We're now going on board with David. It's nice to have him back for the second time after he agonisingly missed out on a qualifying spot at Knockhill. He qualified right towards the front of the grid in second place, but then just made the mistake that saw him spinning down the order. So he's having to come back this week to get that final qualifying spot. And even though nothing's ever set in these kind of races or in any kind of form of motor race, the pace that David's been showing already, particularly in practice and now of course already in qualifying, being more than half a second clear at the moment with 5 1/4 minutes to go from his DPR buddy, buddy in name only I think, which is Christian Zaruta. Chris Gillicorn third quickest, Andrew Parker fourth, and Tom McEwen fifth. David Rowe certainly proven that no matter what case we throw into, no matter how many times, how many weeks or how many races he misses, he always jumps back into one of these virtual Caterhams, and typically you can always expect him to perform incredibly well no matter what he drives.
Yeah, he's down in the DPR simulator there, down in their Red Hill workshop, and makes full use of it, doesn't he? And it's going to be a case of can he hold on for the rest of this evening. Ben Maskell here, one of the top drivers without a qualifying spot up on our qualifying grid so far. We've seen Alan Curtis fade to 8th at the moment, but Ben Maskell's relatively new to our service and definitely doing a good job. We've seen him a couple of times now on our A grid. Making full use of all the track there, wasn't he? He was all over and actually dripping his rear into the dust. We're seeing a lot of dust thrown up by all the drivers at the moment. But seeing Tom McEwen, we regularly see him up and competing, and he's been kind of on that cusp of getting a place, as has Steve Arnell, who's just put himself up in 6th place.
So, of course, the ones we'll have to watch out for that haven't qualified, the ones that don't have the bracket next to them. Just see Mitchell Costas there has popped up into 11th place. Now, I believe a relation of his, whether it's his other half or his sister or someone within his family, Emma Costas is also set to be raced with this tonight as well. So Mitchell didn't quite see him in practice, but he's up there in qualifying 11th place. There's Paul Fernerhoff on track at the moment, currently 9th fastest. 3 3/4 minutes to go in qualifying. David Rowe does have pole position. Christian Zaruta has brought the gap down to just under 0.2 of a second, so he has closed down a little more. Chris Gillicorn in 3rd. He's exactly 0.6 back in 3rd fastest. Then it's Ben Maskell in 4th, Andrew Parker 5th, Tom McEwen 6th. Then it's Steve Arnell, who's always up and around the top 10. He's never out of it, seemingly, in 7th place. Alan Curtis in 8th. Paul Fernhoff, 9th, and John Lang, who got a qualifying spot last week in 10th place. There's Jim Earlham, good to see him back in the grid as well. Currently 14th fastest, 2.6 seconds, it back to 2.7 off pole. A couple of new drivers to fill you in as well, but I think either one of their first few appearances in the A grid. We've got Adam Whitehouse as well, who's currently in 13th place. Adam, who has been a regular B grid runner the last few times, but he's now making one of his first A grid appearances. He's making his way now down towards the hairpin here at Agostini, and he's in the charcoal grey cage and just going out a shot there now. So good to have Adam in the A grid for this one. We've also got there's Emma Costas. There's in the all bright blue cage from 310R. She's currently 17th fastest, and finding her feet in these virtual ones and actually locking up pretty solidly. But again, as it's one of her first few times properly in a competitive sim race like this, I'd imagine. If I got that wrong, I apologise. But Emma, of course, finding her feet in this new car and getting used to it, and certainly it's one of those cars where I think you have to agree, even these guys who have experienced of finding it tough, so putting in someone who is a relative beginner or rookie, if you want to use the polite term, into a car that's as slightly edgy and tail happy as this one with a Caterham, it's always going to be a challenge. So big respect for her to get jumping straight into it and tackling a car that's not all that user friendly for beginner drivers as it is for some of the more experienced men.
No, exactly that, and we always ask our drivers. It's not about the speed. We want to see good consistency and courtesy out on track. We try and keep things as realistic as possible, and just like the real world, you have drivers who are sort of earlier in their racing journey and later in their racing journey. They've all got to share and use the track, and they are both all entitled to be there. And Emma is just starting out on that journey and got a new sim sort of kit set up last week, and because we've only got the A grid tonight, I see John Lang there sort of spinning around at Wilson, just about leaving enough room there, wasn't he, for Alan on his lap? We because we're on one grid tonight rather than split across two. John's still recovering his car. That's quite a big spin, that one. She's joining with us. So into the as we see the perfect example of how tricky the rear end of these cars can be once it starts letting go. With only 1 minute to go, Scott, I think we're looking for people to start moving up the rankings now. Yeah,
I don't think Andy Parker's Alan Curtis has done at least 2 or 3 laps without spinning at least a couple of times. So he's not really gelling with the 310R and the Snetterton combination on this evening at the moment. But someone who is clearly David Rowe. He's still just had 2 tenths up on Christian Zaruta and co. I did see Jaroslav Cherny was also in there too. I think it might be him in the red car actually, just going down the short back straight. But I think it is. Yes, there he goes down towards 10. Now he hasn't set a time yet. Ironically, he's on an outlap, so I think he might be either purposely setting at the back of the grid, or he's had 1 or 2 issues which has prevented him from setting a proper flying lap. I imagine possibly because he's already automatically qualified. He's probably just enjoying himself, having a bit of fun, and just using the outlap to kind of bed the car in before he then starts, I imagine, from the very back of the grid and picks his way through. So one for Jaroslav to watch for. So this will mean it'd be an extra story to watch out for alongside everything else going on towards the front. We've got Rose, Zaruta at the front, Skillicorn in there too. The guys have got to still qualify, guys like Ben Maskell and Steve Arnell, Tom McEwing, Alan Curtis. Those guys want to try and pick their way through, whilst of course we know that Zaruta, Skillicorn, Parker and Lang in there too, and of course the journey from the back of the grid, I imagine this is where he'll start, are all going to have to pick their way through. Ryan Hooker's gone to 3rd quickest, so Ryan's popped up from practically almost nowhere. Hadn't we probably set a time on the board, but the man he qualified at Silverstone up into P3, so looks like we've got quite a packed house here tonight and some pretty competitive drivers both towards the front and in some cases towards the back. Yeah,
you can see all the bracket dot drivers, as we'll call them now. They're all kind of sitting near the top of this grid, aren't they? Ryan Hooker was having a few connection problems, which it looks like he's resolved, and immediately set himself a really good time to put him up in 3rd. We saw last week he put quite a good time to get into 3rd place-ish on the grid, but then had a early really good battle to hold 2nd, but he did slip then. He had a couple of mistakes where he went off into the gravel and ended up losing out.
So qualifying is effectively complete, and as we know and are done, we're going to take you through how they're going to sit up for this 25-minute race here at Snetterton 300, the 4th qualifying heat for the 2022 Winter Warmer of caterhamracer.com. And it's David Rowe who puts himself on pole position by just almost 2 tenths of a second from the other man in the DPR duo, Christian Zaruta. So it's an all DPR front row. Then it's Ryan Hooker with an excellent late effort to put him 3rd fastest alongside Christian Skillicorn on the 2nd row, 4th. Andrew Parker 5th, and then Ben Maskell up in 6th position looking for a qualifying place race tonight, and there's a good chance he could get it started from 6th. But it's Steve Arnell and Paul Fernhoff on the 4th row of the grid from John Lang and Tom McEwing complete the top 10. Then it's Alan Curtis and Graham Hopkins who will start on row 6 from Mitchell Costas and Jim Earlham. Our two relatively newcomers to the A grid, which is Adam Whitehouse and Anthony Hamilton. They'll be starting on the 8th row of the grid. Then it's Gavin Boulton and Emma Costa starting her first A grid race. She'll start 18th, and then Jaroslav Cherny, I imagine purposely, although I'm not sure what quite gave that away, but Jaroslav Cherny will start, looks like, from the back of the grid. He'll want to try and pick his way through, given the fact that he'll be racing simply for fun because he is already qualified after his performance at Cable Park. So all he needs to do is just enjoy himself, have some fun, keep out of trouble, and I guess try and mix it up amongst some of the guys who have already qualified. But of course, to remind people, those who have already qualified, essentially, whilst they will count in the race result in terms of the fortunes of those who need to qualify, they will be invisible in terms of qualifying places. So, for example, as they currently sit on the grid at the moment, if the race was to finish exactly how they qualified, David Rowe, Ben Maskell and Steve Arnell would get the qualifying spots, because even if Christian Zaruta, Ryan Hooker, Chris Skeethercorn and Andrew Parker all finished 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th, none of them take a qualifying spot because they already have one. So Rowe, Maskell and whoever was on 7th place, I almost forgotten that one, that's Alan Curtis, all get the spot in their place instead. So they take over those qualifying spot berths anyway. So we've got quite a heavy grid, 19 cars all set to go for 25 minutes of the Cessna 300 circuit, very much like you get in real life in the Caterham Racing action. It's an all DPR front row. We know what happens with these DPR front rows. It's either all civilised until the last lap, or it's fireworks at turn 1. So given it's Snetterton, given that Zaruta is in a bit more of a relaxed but still competitive mode, and David Rowe knows what's at stake, dare you predict what's going to happen, Chris?
No, not until they've gone through to turn 1. But equally, yeah, Christian was contemplating. You're right. I think Cherny has chosen to be at the back there to give himself that different challenge. Obviously, they're good skills to have when we're coming into the grand final events. As the light comes up, I'm going to call it for Zaruta. He's a wily character.
Because if he does win, Rowe will still get the qualifying spot and finishes behind him, but it's all about the victory. So, for the 4th and final qualifying race for the 2022 Winter Warmer, the caterhamracer.com at Snetterton is underway. Nice clean start from everyone from the grid. No dramas so far as they head down toward Riches for the first time. But I emphasise the word so far because we know what this lot are like sometimes. And they're already going 3 abreast into turn 1 between 1st, 2nd and 3rd. Skeethercorn tries to go up the inside. Then Maskell's having a battle there with Steve Arnell. He gets elbowed out wide by, looks like, I think, Andrew Parker. A couple of cars running wide onto the grass. But it's David Rowe who leads them in towards the Wilson hairpin for the first time. Zaruta's 2nd. Ryan Hooker is 3rd. Skeethercorn's been dropped to 4th. He's under threat from Andrew Parker. But it's Arnell McEwing. Ben Maskell's back up to 7th. So he's been duelling away with both Maskell and Fernhoff. Tom McEwing's hit trouble. He's tumbling towards the back of the grid. And incredibly from the back of the grid, in 40, already up to 13th place from the start in a few corners, is Jaroslav Cherny. Started 19th, up 6 positions into P13 and not hanging around. I would bet, Chris, but by the time he gets to the end of lap number 1, he'll have already passed more than half the field given his pace. And
with his speed, I don't think he'll even stop there. I think we will see him in this lead battle. I can't believe they're going to get away. There's a bit of a touch there from Skeethercorn knocking Ryan Hooker. So Skeethercorn spins to the inside here, and Ryan Hooker's been sent out, and it's caused a little bit of it looked like that might be Cherny actually spinning at the back there, yeah. There was a bit of a chain reaction going on there. The front pack got through, but the middle pack had a bit of an issue.
So, and that all started, as you said, from Ryan Hooker getting attacked from Chris Skeethercorn. Hooker went off onto the grass, but he's carried on in 4th position. And then it's the one that lost out, that was Chris Skeethercorn. He's now down to 17th position. And then the secondary contact was, it looked like it was Cherny battling away with, I didn't quite catch what it was. It was an orange Caterham. Whatever he was battling away with at that point, around about 12th or 13th place, the contact was then what nudged Cherny off, and he's there down to 15th. So all the great progress he made from the back of the grid, he's now going to try and reset and go again as best as possible. It has split the field up a little bit. There is that second big battle pack in the midfield, all scrapping away now behind Ryan Hooker. In fact, all that battling has been so advantageous to the top two that already, as we kind of expected, they've already started to pull away into their own race. Now the scrap for thirds going on. We've got Hooker, Parker, Maskell, Arnell, Fernhoff, Costas and Curtis in there as well. Now they head down the pit straight with Lang leading the next group with Whitehouse and Earlham behind. Look at it as they fan out down the pit straight to end lap number 1. David Rowe leads the way, but only by a mere hundredths of a second. There's a change from the lead. I saw it coming because it was that close, but it switched back again. So Rowe and Zaruta are already going at it side side by side off camera. There they are, through Richie's corner, and again, wheel to wheel, down towards the Wilson hairpin. Tsuruta has that outside line. He'll look for the switchback if it's possible. But Rowe does the widey thing. He parks it right on the apex and prevents any avenue for Tsuruta to get through. The next group as well, it's all happening here, Chris, though. It's third place down to about 8th or 9th place, as you say. We've got Hooker, Parker, Maskell, Arnell, Fernerhuff, Costas and Curtis all in there together. Pick a podium finisher from that lot.
They're absolutely going for it, aren't they? Hammer and Tong. There's monumental battles going on. We've already had more action than we had for the whole of the last event. I think it was only really Blair McConaughey we saw making forward movements, and today they all look like they've had their Weetabix, and off they go. As we said, the leaders there, both off track outside of Agostini, so they could be sailing off into the distance and keeping themselves comfortable, but they are not willing to do that. We've got Ben Maskell, looks like he's dropping back, so it looks like this battle behind is one to definitely keep an eye out for.
You realise who we've got in the top two, don't you? Of course, it's David Rowe and Christian Tsuruta. Those two are never going to take the easy route. I cast your mind back to when they made contact on the final lap at Silverstone on the Grand Prix circuit. That actually happened. So, there's contact. In fact, Ben Maskell's off the road, so is Mitchell Costas. Both of them involved. That's on the run out of Oggies. They're both into the barriers, and they're tumbling down the order outside the top 10. So they're going to try and rejoice. That now promotes Arnell up to 4th behind Ryan Hooker. It puts Paul Fernerhuff in 5th position. Andrew Parker in 6th, Alan Curtis 7th, John Lang is 8th, and Jim Earlham rounds out in 9th place, with Chris Skillicorn in 10th after his lap 1 excursion. So he's climbed back up a few more spots through other dramas up at the field ahead of him. David Rowe now, after him and Tsuruta have finally stopped fighting, has now got a 1.4 second lead over his DPR teammate. Someone else off in the background in the grass. That's behind John Lang. I think that's Andrew Parker. There's lots of contact going in the background. Someone's off the road. It is Andrew Parker. So he can't ever seem to get a race where he gets a break, can he, of that in any case? If he does get a break, it's very few and far between, because Andrew's back off the road again. He's now into 17th place again. So in the space of literally 2 laps, this race is completely, apart from the top 2, this race is almost technically turned entirely on its head. And to emphasise that, look who sets the fastest lap of the race. It's not Rowe, it's not Tsuruta, it's not Hooker, it's not even Cherney. Steve Arnell in 4th place. What is going on that 3?
Yeah, and it's actually these 2 calm heads, Arnell and Ferniehoff, which we sort of generally see towards the front of the grid, but actually this season have slipped back slightly and always been the bridesmaids rather than the bride. But their calm, sensible heads have definitely paid off at the moment, and whilst they've got 3 people ahead of them currently, 2 of them have already got qualifying spots, so they are sitting pretty currently in 4th and 5th, but they have got the 2nd and 3rd qualification spots behind David Rowe at the moment.
Head their way through up towards the front of another lap, and I'm just waiting for this to go through. My screen's gone off for some reason, so there we go, it's back again. So heading up towards Oggies now once again. See Steve Arnell just turning his way through Hamilton, but still Rowe with that 1.5 second lead or so. They haven't totally run away from 3rd place and co. There is David Rowe. Of course, Christian Tsuruta, who was already qualified, so he's one of the few drivers in the field that already has that automatic qualifying spot. As it stands right now, if the race was to finish as it was, it would be David Rowe, Steve Arnell and Paul Fernerhuff all get a qualifying spot each, because they would have been the 3 highest placed drivers that haven't already qualified. So even though Christian Tsuruta and Ryan Hooker are in 2nd and 3rd, I'll remind you, they don't take an extra qualifying spot from anyone else. They already have one, so it then gets transferred down to the next couple of drivers who don't have one yet. So Arnell and Fernerhuff would earn them if they stay in 4th and 5th, and of course, even if Tsuruta and Hooker were to fall behind, if they stayed there for 2nd and 3rd, that would be a qualifying spot all theirs, and it would then force everyone else who hasn't qualified yet to rely, if possible, on getting one of the 6 spots in the Croft Last Chance Saloon race next week in order to get themselves onto the final 18 car grid for the grand final, which will either be at Alton Park International or the Anglesey Coastal Circuit, whichever the drivers choose in the vote. So because it will be down to the drivers to vote which circuit they want to go on. Fastest laps have been traded, first of all by David Rowe and then quickly by Christian Tsuruta. 2 minutes 7.7 for Rowe, and then it's beaten by a 10th by Christian Tsuruta to bring the gap back down to 1.3 seconds. So methinks that even though this gap was about 1.5 at one point, Christian Tsuruta, in ever typical fashion, given the fact we've still got 18 minutes to go, there's still plenty of time for him to close that group back down. But these two tend to be at the front. They tend to kind of just go back and forth with fastest laps and keeping the gap, and whenever they get quite close to the end, that's when the 5X tend to happen. And of course, as I say, I think less said about Silverstone Grand Prix a couple of seasons ago, but these two probably the better.
I think they still love ribbing each other about that one. And yeah, you're right. Christian does look like he's on it, but equally David Rowe has held it together for many more laps than we've probably seen all season. Christian going wide at Agostini there, so actually losing back. So David's clearly quick enough to put Christian under pressure when he's trying to catch back up. Everyone's sort of settled down into that slightly spread out mode, and it's almost to get a bit of a breather before they go at it again. I'm sure we're going to see it all tidy itself back through as we see some of the people coming back through the field. Here's Chris Skillicorn, who we saw have that accident early on in the race with Ryan Hooker, and now he is back up into 7th place. So the cream is coming up to the top there. Alan Curtis is the next person available for a position qualification spot if anyone has an issue out front. But he is now being caught up by Tom McEwen, who we also saw having issues. So he would then take over that sort of runner-up spot and one just ready for any issues out front.
Yeah, and of course it all depends on if either Arnell or Fernerhub, because arguably David Rowe is in a much more comfortable position you would be able to justify, I think, than I'd say that Arnell Fernerhub. There is a gap of about 1.6 seconds between 5th and 6th positions. That was very close. That was Alan Curtis for Tom McEwen all over the roll cage. They come up towards the bomb hole, the right-hander. Just stay trying to look around the outside. I'm going to stay with these two because Tom McEwen was almost trying to prize his way around the outside into on the exit of the right hand in this long, ever-arcing corner. And he's trying to sneak up the inside as Curtis ran wide. They go under brakes, lock up from Curtis. They turn in through the apex, but Curtis holds firm. McEwen wasn't having any of it though. He's trying to elbow his way past to come down the pit straight onto the centre straight now, and he has got the side draft. They're going to run wheel to wheel down the centre straight up towards Ritchie's for another lap. Still 16 minutes to go. We haven't even hit half distance yet. There's been so much action and so many talking points to go. It's been pretty thoroughly entertaining. McEwen goes diving up the inside in towards Ritchie's, and that's the move done, well, temporarily at least, because Curtis saw that coming, gets the switch back, and now they're going to be wheel to wheel again, down towards Wilson, under brakes. They almost lean on each other, and that's Curtis just reminding that McEwen that I've got the inside line, I'll have the corner in the apex, thank you. But now they're going at it, and they are still side by side as they switch once more. Now this time through Palmer, which is a very tricky off-camber corner on the outside line. Got to be careful on corner exit. And now as they come on towards the short straight towards Agostini, they've perhaps keeping side by side now, ever since the exit of practically, ever since right towards Coram. Now they go wheel to wheel again. They are still locked in combat. This time it's McEwen's turn to get himself back in front of Curtis. These two, whilst it's entertaining, there's a double-edged sword here. One, it's great to watch, but at the same time, these two keep on scrapping the way they do. It's they're going to benefit the cars behind them and the cars in front. The cars behind to catch them and the cars in front to get away.
It does look like McEwen might have actually he obviously caught over a gap and has overtaken Alan, but it really, really good racing by both of them there. Give and take, and Alan absolutely showing his, Tom's lost the rear end of the car coming out to the back straight, but actually held it, and has he got enough speed? I hope so. But Alan really showing the development of his racecraft there, holding McEwen to the outside going into, it's got a new name, the corner, hasn't it? It's Wilson now, isn't it? The hairpin, the first hairpin. Really showing how much his racecraft's improved, and he'll be really looking forward to his 310R season. These two are definitely the cream of the racing at the moment out on track. Everyone else has spread themselves out.
I would imagine that if these two keep at it, then because if I believe I'm correct in remembering that the last chance of the race is only exclusive for drivers that haven't had a qualifying spot. So everyone that has already got one is not allowed to contest that race. It's only for those who haven't qualified. If this is a precursor to what we're going to get at Croft, I'm actually quite looking forward to it, because these two are going really back and forth. And Croft is another circuit quite like Snetterton. It's flat, it's got long straights, it's got a quite a variety of corners, got a lot of high-speed ones, a couple of big braking zones. It is another really excellent circuit for occasional racing. And so if this Snetterton race is giving us what we could be seeing at Croft next week, I say if these two are going to be in the action towards the front of the field, I say bring it on.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of my favourite races purely because we get to see some different drivers. So that, oftentimes by that stage, most of the big names have got their qualification spots, and it's good to see this sort of midfield that we sort of dip into every now and again, but we get to see them race for the podium, and that's really good to see.
Yeah, and it's good to see them scrapping away as hard as they are at the moment. Meanwhile, here's Christian Zarita still keeping that gap steady at about roughly 1.7 seconds. Here's our onboard view with Christian. And there is the virtual avatar of Christian Zarita wheeling his way out of Oggies, and now just dips a wheel onto the grass just to help try and flick the car in through the right-hander of Williams. Mind the tyre stack on the inside line, and just run a little bit wide over the curb, and then back up to go and grab another gear, and then just continues the chase of his DPR teammate David Rowe. So the DPR 1-2 out in front. David Rowe, if he wins the race, will take one of the 3 automatic qualifying spots. This man already has qualified by virtue of his performance at Silverstone at the first race. Ryan Hooker, so he's currently in 3rd. and it's Steve Arnell in 4th, Paul Fernerhuff in 5th. Of course, those two at the moment are the other 2 automatic qualifiers. And John Lang's come up pretty well. He was a little bit further back in the top 10, but he's now managed to climb his way up into 6th, despite all the early dramas from everyone else around him. 7th for Chris Skillicorn, 8th for Tom McEwing, 9th for Alan Curtis, and Ben Maskell rounds up the top 10. And then we'll quickly run through the rest of the order. It's Mitchell Costas 11th, Adam Whitehouse 12th, Jim Erland 13th, Graham Bolton 14th. It's Anthony Hamilton in 15th place. Jaroslav Cherny only 16th. He really hasn't had a very good race in the back after he had that earlier contact. Then we have Emma Costas running in 17th place, and Andrew Parker after his earlier spin way back down in 18th, with Graham Hopkins sadly the only DNF in this race after he had very early troubles in the first couple of laps. There's Ryan Hooker.
We've actually had a turnaround there, Scott.
We have, yeah, you're correct. I looked at the lap time. I wondered why Ryan Hooker's lap time was so slow. He's obviously made a mistake, and that has allowed Steve Arnell to sneak up into what is 3rd place. And I don't know if we've got this prior knowledge at all, but I can't remember the exact highest place that Steve Arnell's finished the race. So if he does finish in 3rd place overall, is that going to be one of his best results since he joined caterhamracer.com? I think it might be.
He has been always up there. I think we've seen him on the upper step of the podium, but it might have been before we started our broadcast. So I think as far as broadcasts go, this might well be one of his top results. I could be misspeaking there, like you say, and I don't want to do that. But equally, this has kind of put him into a difficult position, right? Ryan is not relevant for him, yet Ryan is looking hungry to overtake. So it's almost, if I was Steve, I think I'd be quite keen to just let Ryan go, to not upset my race.
What he will be looking to do, of course, is to try and keep the pride of just trying to hold on if he can to the position, and to try and just keep himself as focused as possible on potentially holding on to that 3rd place where it's viable. So now as they come down the back straight, and now up towards Brundle and Nelson once again, and now they come up through the complex. Back into Brundle Nelson, and just keep an eye on Paul Fernerhuff behind. He's just there in 5th place in the kind of the BMW art car style livery. And as he goes out of shot.
John Lang
6th place for John Lang.
Yeah, he was showing his speed again, wasn't he? He was caught all the way up with Paul Fernerhuff, but he must have made a mistake because he's now drifted back into the sort of clutches of Chris Skillicorn. But John's already got his qualification spot, so he doesn't have to worry too much about that. But it is good to see him still right up here at the sharp end of the grid and competing really well with other people who have got their qualification spots. So it shows that he's going to be a force when it comes to that final. And that's definitely a step forward for him, because we've seen him sort of towards the rear of the field a fair bit recently. So he's definitely taken that step forward and moved himself to that front of the grid.
Looking good so far in P6, and just holding off Skillicorn there in 7th. We've got McEwing, Curtis and Maskell rounding off that top 10. As we go back to our scrap for 3rd place, with Ryan Hooker, Steve Arnell, Paul Fernerhuff all together, 3rd through 5th. John Lang there in 6th position.
Yeah, and Hooker has got back through again, so I think he, like I say, I don't think Steve would have fought that one too much. I don't think it was an exciting overtake, let's put it that way, because at the moment that means Arnell and Fernerhuff are still comfortable in that 4th and 5th, and they've got sensible heads on them, so they know there's a big gap now back to Tom McEwing, who's the next challenger. There's a good 10 seconds, if not more, back to those next challengers.
So just looking at the rest of the field as they come up through the next few corners. So of course we've got, just as they come up now, with just about 8 3/4 minutes to go in this race right now, and so far it seems as though the gap at the front, one thing I will mention is that the gap at the front has actually come down. I was actually looking at the gap, it was about 1.5, 1.6. It's come down about half a second, and there they are, coming up through Brundle and Nelson. So David Rowe, he has been in this position a couple of times before, when he's found himself in the lead a little bit, and then just in the closing to the second half of the race, just it starts to go on. He either loses a little bit of rhythm, or he just starts to overheat his tyres a little bit, or just loses a bit of pace, or the car behind just seems to wake up a little bit, because you can see by the way that Christian Zaruta is absolutely monstering the curves. He is absolutely taking no prisoners. He might be automatically qualified, but let's remind ourselves, these two of course might be teammates, but they are also quite fierce rivals on track in the virtual world, and they will not miss up an opportunity to race with each other. Even if it does mean they end up in contact, they will race each other as hard as possible if they were doing so in real life. So these two will push as hard as they can to battle And Christian, of course, is a racer through and through. Even though he's fully qualified, we both know, of course, he wants to go for the win, even though it's going to mean essentially nothing. It'll mean essentially a bit of ego and pride to him to try at least beat David, of course. And these two, of course, as we know, whenever they're on track together, they're always guaranteed a good, entertaining, fun, and competitive race to watch between them. So Christian is currently on his purpose at the moment, trying to hold on to the coattails of David Rowe. They're both on a little wide exiting through Palmer. Now the short sprint up towards the hairpin now, Agostini. And you just feel that Tsuruta then he's dropped back a tiny bit. He's now got the gap to run about roughly a second. So Tsuruta's managed to wind it back out again, but it's just looking quite close between the two of them.
It feels to me that David has got actually more consistent speed. I wouldn't put it past these two to have just had a quick conversation on Discord and said, hey, come on, let's get a bit more racy and let me catch back up again. I would say I wouldn't put it past them because they do love the battling that they have out on track. But equally, we've seen that Christian, he was monstering those curves, but that's a risk-reward thing. He may get some speed on a lap, but then every other lap it might cost him more time. And I think that's what we're seeing. The gap is drifting backwards, and today it looks like Rowe has got that upper hand.
Of course, there's still a bit to go. There's still 6 1/4 minutes, and this is what the commentators curse. David Rowe looked like he was going a little bit wide there, so it's not always as simple as that usually. And as they go back through, you could. It's particularly. Oh, that's not going to help it. That's Emma Costa's going off the race. It's going to be very tricky. She did very well to keep out the way of the two leaders. That was very smart driving from her. Well done for her first run. It's not always easy for rookies because you can sometimes with the leaders at the pace that they are, sometimes with a faster car behind you, get a little bit spooked by them coming across, and it might cause you to not know where to go. But even though Emma was on the grass, she was sensible enough to see them coming, and she was able to let them pass before she managed to pick herself back up onto the circuit and carry on. So that was good, clever driving from her. Well done. Good sense of racecraft, a good sense of knowledge of the cars on track to be able to hold on to that. Gap is now half a second, and we know from Caterham Racer before, particularly in Assetto Corsa, the magic gap that you need to start getting a tow from the car in front is half a second. And now as we go back on board with Christian, there's David Rowe's car, the two-tone black and white car just looming in front of him. There's an opportunity here to close in. He's got 5 minutes to do it, so he has got a little bit of time left, but of course the 5 minutes can translate to roughly about 2 or 3 laps depending on how quickly you can get around. So considering they've already been on lap for about the last 25-30 seconds, it could be we get possibly this and 2 more. So essentially he's got 2.5, 3 laps to try and get this done. But I imagine either they're going to be playing with each other until the last lap, or Christian will simply just attack at the first opportunity he gets. Either way, I don't expect this order to stay exactly the same. I'm expecting to change at least once before we get to the checkered flag.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can't see this not resulting in at least an overtaking opportunity, and whether that's botched or not, we'll have to wait and see. I did notice a couple of laps back, John Lang lost it, so he was in that comfortable 6th place, but he did lose the car and he sort of dropped back down the field, and we see him now in 11th place. So he's obviously had a bit of an eventful thing, but we'll stay with this lead battle because, like you say, I think it is developing. But it's interesting how it's ebbing and flowing as the sort of lap goes on. We saw him well under half a second around Agostini and going up towards Hamilton, but in other places on the track, David seems to get the exits a little bit quicker and therefore carries them all that extra speed down these straights as he drops that wheel off that curb. We saw him do that last time, didn't we? It doesn't seem to cost him any time though. And he
is, of course, they're both, even using a bit of the track and even more, they're both not afraid to use the limits of the car and of the circuit to extract a quick lap time, and of course using plenty of the curb as well. I noticed the Christian is looking very nice and tidy through there, and at times he has just put the car onto the sausage curb a little bit just to try and get a little bit more leverage around the corner. And now look at this, he's as close as he's ever been in this race. He's under 2 tenths per second. He's in that slipstream. They're both hugging the pit wall for the shortest run down towards Ritchie's corner. He was about 3 tenths quick on that last lap. Now we're going to go to the last, let's say, 2 laps of the race now. 3.5 minutes left. Try to run through Ritchie's. Bro was a little bit wide on his line, but he wasn't so wide that he was going off the road. And now for the first time properly, David Rowe feels he has to go defensive for the first time in a while. Tsuruta looks for the switcheroo on the exit. That's a clever bit of driving. Force him to the edge of the circuit, but now it gives Rowe the inside for the left-hander at Wilson. So at Palmer, just come out of Wilson. Rowe throws it back up the inside and back into the lead. But now look at this, the better run, the tinier line off the corner. Now that gives Tsuruta the run he needs. He's in the slipstream. He looks to the outside, forces Rowe to have to go all the way to the inside line. The tried to run under brake, which means he was slower through the corner and slower on corner exit. It is a company, even though it's advantage row on the track, I think you have to say, Chris, at the moment, it's advantage Christian in terms of tactical racing at the moment, because he's in the optimal position to put an attack, and because usually in many cases it's better to be the hunter rather than hunted, and that's exactly where Christian is right now.
Yeah, well, David definitely doesn't want to do is lose his qualification spot from pride of trying to stay out in front. He'll want to get that in the bag, so he's comfortable. But yeah, both of them showing exactly what you need to do in these situations where, you know, David chose that he had to sort of defend, which left the undercut open, and Christian took those invitations. But nearly all the time, David's been on the inside of the tracks. He's protected the inside of the corner, which is exactly what you want to do. Christian here trying to line up for a late move here, coming down under the bridge. David moving out, so he's felt he was comfortable in that situation to let him do that. Christian can't get around the outside, but still gains the extra momentum coming out towards Bombhole.
So now as they come down towards the complex again, we've got about another lap and a half through the Bombhole, up now through Coram again. This time now Rowe is having to really trying to back Zaruta up a little bit here, but all he can do is try and just halt his potential move down the pit straight, because he's only got less to go. Zaruta might have a look up the inside. He thought about it. But that's interesting. He's forced Rowe to go deeper into the corner and tighter onto the run. He went on the inside line, entering the left-hander at Murray's, because now, on the run down the pit straight, again, the gap is about 0.3 per second or so, but in still that slipstream is Christian Zaruta, and he hasn't been able to capitalise enough to get a run that will put him alongside him now. They're going on to the final lap of the race, but 1:20 left on the clock now. So essentially, Christian Zaruta is going to make this happen. He's got to do it now on this lap. It's now or never. Through Richie's corner. And Rowe was a little bit wider again through Richie's this time, whereas Zaruta took the optimal racing line. And this time now, the switcheroo tactic doesn't work, because David Rowe was wise to that. He kept the car right where he needed to on the racing line and wasn't bothered too much about an attack. And that's just giving Zaruta another opportunity to just think about where he's going to pass here. Again, tidier line slightly. David Rowe a little wider using all the circuit. And once more, Rowe's not comfortable. He has to go one way, then the other, but he isn't sort of blocking as such. He's simply just trying to break the toe a little bit on the under brakes before he got back to the racing line for Agostini. Up through the hairpin again, now back through the gears. And now towards the left-hander at Hamilton. It's quite tricky. It's a faster corner than it looks. It's quite a relatively tight radius, but it's quite high speed for what it is. And then Oggie's tight early apex, opens out on the exit. And now the last chance in a straight line, apart from the centre straight, off the final corner, where Zaruta's got to try and steer himself up there. But David then is about 7/10 ahead, and I think possibly, unless I'm about to put the competence curse on it, 7/10 per second. He's out of range. It might be David's now to lose.
Yeah, it looks like that this way. You've only got the Brundle S's and then Bombhole to go, so definitely guaranteed first and second if it stays like this. But you know that Christian's going to sling one wherever he can. But I would say, yeah, that gap looks defendable, doesn't it?
It's up to 0.8 now, when it was a relatively tidy run through for both of them, but Rowe looks a little bit more comfortable. He's still got Coram, and he's still got Murray's in the pit straight to go. Through Coram he goes. Zaruta is pushing as hard as he dares. He's got it back down to around about 6.5 He's pushing as hard as he can. I think it might not be enough. He's outside of toe range, and so if they come out tomorrow, it's the final time. A thump of the curb will probably seal his fate. Up to the checkered flag. He missed out on Knock Hill last week, but so far it looks as though he won't be like it this time. David Rowe will head to the checkered flag, and he will book an automatic qualifying spot in qualifying race 4 as he wins at Snetterton, but only just by a few tenths per second from Christian Zaruta in P2. And now we wait as I look at my watch, because we've got several seconds to wait back for our third place man, which is Ryan Hooker. But behind him are our second and third automatic qualifiers for this race. It'll be Steve Arnell, who takes the second spot, and Paul Fernhoff, who just holds off Chris Gillicorn, who has already automatically qualified. So Rowe, Arnell and Fernhoff are 3 automatic qualifiers, all done in fairly fine style. The next best car who hasn't qualified will have to try again at the Croft Last Chance Saloon is Tom McEwing. Then Ben Maskell comes through in 8th. Mitchell Costa's recovered from an early mistake. He finishes 9th, and John Lang was as high as 6th at one point, but he comes home in P10. So not a top 10 finish, but lower than he would like to have been. Alan Curtis is 11th. Adam Whitehouse will come home in a relatively strong 12th to finish mid-pack. And then 13th place will be for Gareth Bolton. And then it's Andy Hambleton coming across line 5th, 14th place. Jaroslav Cherny will struggle to a rather uninspired 15th place. And what I mean by that is that he would have wanted a lot more than that for the back of the grid, but just getting caught up in early incidents really did hamper his race. So P15 is all he'll have to settle with, but he's automatically qualified. And he takes the fastest lap of the race on the final lap. So that just shows what could have been. And what a lap it was, 2 minutes 7.354. He pumped in a quick one on that last lap to certainly put in a bit of a warning shot to those in the final. Jim Erlam looks as though he didn't even make the flag in the end. He said he should have been 16th, but he's DNF'd sadly, which is a shame. And across the line will come Andrew Parker, and also Emma Costas has also made it to the flag as well in her first race in 17th. So only 2 DNFs from that one. So in the eternal struggle between DPR teammates, it's David Rowe who wins out this time by looks like 7/10 of a second from Christian Zeruti in second place. Ryan Hooker finishes third, but also an automatic qualifier. But the other 2 automatic qualifying spots alongside your race winner David Rowe are Steve Arnell and Paul Fernhouse, so they don't have to worry about going through to the last chance saloon. They can take if they want. Well, they will take a week's break now to prepare for either Alton Park or Anglesey. Then it's 6th place for Chris Skillicorn, who was already qualified. 7th for Tom McEwing. He had some great battling at one point with Ben Maskell and co. Maskell finishes 8th, Mitchell Costas finishes 9th, and John Lank, who is also an automatic qualifier already, he finished up in 10th. Alan Curtis dropped back into 11th place, and Whitehouse was 12th. Gavin Bilton, got that right eventually, in 13th place. Anthony Hamilton 14th. Jaroslav Cherny, who chose to start from the back of the grid but didn't really have the best of luck, so he has to finish in 15th place, but did pinch the fastest lap of the race on the final lap. Jim Erlam looks like he DNF'd before he got to the checkered flag. Sadly, he wasn't classified, but he shows as being essentially 16th. But it's Emma Costas who survived her first race to pick up 17th place, and then it's 18th for Andrew Parker and Graham Hopkins, who also retired early on the opening lap as well. Well, that wasn't bad, was it? That was a pretty decent back and forth battle between teammates. There's lots of tight, close, and frantic scrapping in the opening laps as well. There's some battles in the mix throughout the middle of those stages of those race too. Plenty of tough talking points in that instance, but once again, the thing that dominated it was those 2 dominant DPR drivers, and they really do end up in their own world when they're in their own battle at that point, and so it certainly proved that to be. And Christian got close at times. He got as close. He very briefly took the lead at one point and was able to get himself in front. But David Rowe seems as though on this occasion he just had enough of an answer for any of Christian's attacks and was able to put his car in some cases in all the wrong places, but in all the right times to prevent Christian from getting past. So good solid driving from both, but that was good tactical driving in many cases and tactical driving with a steady head from David Rowe to beat Christian on this occasion. I'm sure those 2 will certainly want to go at it pretty heavily by the time they get to the final race. Yeah,
no, it was definitely an exciting race, and especially early on, the early laps with that midfield pack behind David Rowe was absolutely, they were going at each other. Eventually it all kind of exploded as a little minor contact then caused a bit of a chain reaction, and that then spread out the race in the middle. But equally, the race at the front then started to get going, and Christian was definitely sticking his car in where it wasn't wanted and making it work. David Rowe, though, did look for most of this evening like he just had that little edge, didn't he? And well done on getting that position. Few people sort of slid back down. We saw Alan Curtis sort of figuring early doors, but the 2 that the kind of mature heads, I guess, amongst that melee at the beginning were Paul Fernhoff and Steve Arnell, who just have taken their qualification spots, and well deserved indeed.
Excellent stuff. So as we wind down from another excellent caterhamracer.com race, I think it's once again time to see if we can have a chat to some of the drivers that were in the mix in that, including, of course, our front runners and our automatic qualifiers, and some other maybe drivers are interested might be to do. So, Chris, as ever, it's time for you to have a wander and see who's about, and I imagine possibly it might involve having a chat with the man at some point, with the man that's on screen right now.
Yeah, that's David. Have you got us in the commentary box?
I do. Good evening, guys.
Hey, it was worth coming for in the end, wasn't it? You broke away at the beginning there, but Christian definitely didn't let you have it comfortable, and he reeled you in for some battling at the end there.
Yeah, I just said to him offline that 75% into the race, he could tell that he had me rattled, and then it was a bit of defence mode, and then I just basically had to do a good last lap, which I managed to pull off, and I'm very happy with actually beating Christian for a change.
Yeah, it just looked on screen like you just, for the majority of that race, okay, we'll ignore the sort of second third of it. You had that little edge, and you had the exits onto the straights, which just then let you get away.
Yeah, Christian. I don't quite know what happened to his pace at the start of the race. It wasn't great at all. He kept on making mistakes. I see him throwing it off into the grass every now and again, and then he just came back at me. Pretty decent laps, I think he was putting in, and just obviously it's one thing kind of coming up to the back of you, but then trying to overtake, I'm going to get my elbows out, and he knows that.
Yeah, and the battle looked good and clean, and yeah, really, really, really well done. So you've got your qualification spot, so we won't see you next week, but we'll see you the following week in the grand final.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Speak soon. Okay, and we'll give Christian a little bit of airtime just because he did do such a good job at that. Christian, have you got us in the commentary box?
Yes.
Congratulations on second place. Couldn't quite get the win that time out, but a good race nonetheless.
Wow, very, very disappointing.
I mean,
you had to beat you sometime.
True. And I was trying to be careful, as you know, he was still yet to qualify, so I didn't want to. It
would have been a pretty poor show for him to not qualify in that spot. So, but a good race nonetheless. You got a week off now whilst we get the last chance saloon done, and then you're back for the grand final.
Very good. Yes, the full road takedown will be initiated for that for sure.
I think we've got Rossetti and Cherney who'll be back right in the field for that. So I'm sure you'll have more in your to deal with than just the row.
Hopefully.
Excellent.
Or maybe hopefully not.
All right. We'll speak to you soon. Well done tonight.
Cheers.
Okay, let's bring in Steve Arnell if we can. Hey Steve, have you got us in the commentary box?
Yes. Hi Chris. Hi Scott.
Hey, great to be talking to you. So it looked like kind of calm heads prevailed, and your qualification spot is secure.
Indeed, yes. I just sort of settled into it. I mean, early on there was a bit of a tussle going on, but I managed to sort of get a bit of clear air and just trying to stay in that gap. And when Ryan had his spin, I saw him behind me and thought, do I defend? But I realised he's got better pace than me, so just gave him an easy pass and thought of qualification spots rather than podiums. Yeah,
because that guarantees you now the place in the grand final, and that's ultimately what we're all aiming for. And we were talking on stream actually whether you were going to defend or not, but remind us: have you had a podium on a Grid A yet at caterhamracer.com?
No.
So fourth. It would have been.
Yeah, it was my joint fourth, so I've been fourth before, but yeah, never, always the bridesmaid. Yeah.
You'll just have to make up for it next in a couple of weeks' time now at the grand final.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Well done, Steve.
Thanks. Cheers, gents.
And let's get Paul Fernioff in here as well. Hey, Paul, have you got us in the commentary box?
Hello.
Great to be speaking to you as well. Again, as like I just said to Steve, calm head prevailed there, and a qualification spot secure.
Pleasure to be in this booth, I must say.
Yeah, it's been a little while, but overall, I guess once the seas parted early on, when everything looked like it was going to explode for quite a few laps, actually, you kind of sailed through the middle, and it was quite calm after that. John Lang came back to you, but again, he's also got his qualification spot, so not really a threat.
Yeah, pretty much. It was skirt the trouble on lap 1, lap 2, and then settle in easily behind Steve, who had pace on me easy. So I was just watching Tom behind me doing fastest laps. Thought I'd put one in for myself, and that was about as interesting as it got, really.
Yep, and I guess in some ways that's the nice non-interesting thing for you, just no threat from in front or behind, and a week off now, and then back to it at the grand final.
Indeed, should be watching with interest.
Excellent stuff. Cheers, Paul.
Take care.
Yeah, I think we've had a good old natter with some drivers, and yeah, say if we could have kept up the intensity for the whole of that race that we had in the first few laps, I think it would have been incredible. But I think that was asking a bit too much, and it did all go a bit wrong. But yeah, I think we're in for a good grand final, and we got our final 6 places next week to discover who that full grid are going to be.
That should be very intriguing, of course, particularly with the prospect that we have, of course, for some of the drivers that would come through, and some of the drivers that we saw battling in the mid-pack, which is certainly putting quite a battle. So there's guys like Alan Curtis, Ben Haskell, Tom McEwing, those kind of guys who are all going to try and get themselves in those front-running spots. And, of course, without the likes of David Rowe, Will Rossetti, Jaroslav Cherney, Chris Skithercorn, Blair McConaughey, Christian Zaruta, all those guys that you typically see at the front, as you say, that's the good thing about the Last Chance Saloon race, is that it is going to give a few drivers who don't normally get the chance to properly showcase their true pace up at the front. They do get the chance to be able to get themselves in the spotlight a bit more and to push forward and to ultimately try and get themselves one of those 6 positions. So this should be intriguing to watch, and I'm sure it's going to be quite a fascinating chance race. So we've had Silverstone, we've had Cadwell, we've had Knockhill, and now we've had Snetterton. Of course, it is just 2 races left to go. It is that Last Chance Saloon race next week, and then of course after that it will be the grand final. And I remind you, it is a driver's vote. They choose where they want their grand final to be. It will either be the Alton Park International Circuit or the Anglesey Coastal Circuit, 2 circuits that are quite unique in their own ways, to being winding, quite undulating, challenges in their own right. And so I think 2 points. First of all, whichever circuit they choose, Chris, of course, it's going to be a challenge first and foremost. It's going to be quite fast and frantic. Both circuits do lend themselves to relatively good racing, particularly Alton Park with its narrow winding nature. Because before that, we've got this, I'm hoping it's going to be rather energetic Last Chance Saloon race, double the qualifying spots to fill our 18-car grid that you get from a normal race, so 6 up in total. I reckon the next 2 races potentially have something to be, something quite special.
Yep, absolutely looking forward to it. Like I said, looking forward to seeing that midfield battle, but progressed and promoted to the top, top spots, and maybe getting their first podium. But equally, the top 6 are going to get their qualification spots. So yeah, I can't wait to see what happens.
So another race come and gone, another race complete, and again, we now know the identity of 3 more drivers that make it through into the official grand final in a couple of weeks' time. It is David Rowe along with Paul Fernhoff and Steve Arnell, and they will join, of course, Will Rossetti, Ron Hooker, Christian Zarita, Jaroslav Cherny, Jensen Hassler, Andrew Parker, Chris Gillicorn, Blair McConaughey and John Lang on that grand final grid. Who are going to be the final 6? You're going to have to come back next week and find out. It is the Last Chance in the race at Croft next week, same time to find out those positions. But once again, thanks for those who've been watching both live or watching back on the recording of the broadcast on YouTube and on Facebook. From me, Scott Woodwiss, from Chris Hutchinson and all of us here at caterhamracer.com, once again, thank you very much for watching. Take care and join us next week for our final chance for drivers to qualify for that grand final. Last Chance Saloon coming up next week. Do not miss it. But until then, take care and we shall see you soon later on. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.